The film begins in a lab, where we see a few secret agents watching closely to monitor a hedgehog known as Shadow, who is in a compromising situation. Shadow, now heavily sedated and unconscious in a tube, begins to revive himself. Immediately, the other agents are alerted and quickly grab their weapons, waiting to attack. Just then, Shadow gains consciousness and, with his full hedgehog abilities, breaks out of the tube. Walking out with an imposing aura, Shadow seems unfazed despite being in cryosleep for many years in a Japanese prison. Shadow immediately attacks and, in a fierce battle, eliminates all the agents except one, whom he briefly spares before knocking out. The two agents from earlier are also killed before Shadow uses his incredible speed to escape the scene. The scene shifts to Sonic and Tails having a conversation as they prepare to race. Knuckles is adamant that it is his destiny to claim victory, which Sonic dismisses as a joke. They ready themselves for the race, and as it begins, Sonic appears overly confident, believing he's winning with minimal effort. However, Knuckles and Tails outpace him, leaving Sonic behind. Realizing he underestimated them, Sonic pushes his full speed to catch up, but is ultimately too late. Tails teases him about his loss, but Sonic soon realizes it was all a distraction. When Sonic returns home, he discovers the distraction was orchestrated to set up a surprise party in his honor. Grateful, Sonic thanks Tom for organizing the celebration before heading underground. There, we discover Sonic's old cage and a painting he narrates about, explaining it was something he drew on his first night on Earth to remember where he came from. The story shifts to Shadow arriving in Tokyo, where he realizes it is now 2024 and he has been trapped for 50 years. Suddenly, more machinery arrives to capture him again, but Shadow effortlessly takes them down. Meanwhile, Sonic and his fellow hedgehogs continue to celebrate, but their fun is short-lived when federal agents, led by Director Rockwell, arrive. She informs them of an imminent danger and pleads for their help. The hedgehogs agree and immediately head to Tokyo. Moments later, they arrive at their destination and prepare to jump from their aircraft. While complaining to Director Rockwell about the lack of meals during the flight, they dive and land safely. The trio is shocked to see the misty and beautiful city of Tokyo now in ruins. Suddenly, a vehicle hurtles toward them, which Knuckles easily intercepts. At that moment, Shadow reveals himself. Sonic is amazed by Shadow's striking resemblance to himself and attempts to start a conversation, asking why Shadow is there and why they look alike. Shadow dismisses Sonic, accusing him of working with his enemies, as he saw them jump from the chopper earlier. Knuckles, unwilling to tolerate the accusations, charges at Shadow but is easily overpowered. Tails is impressed by Shadow's abilities, and the three hedgehogs agree to attack him together. This proves to be a mistake, as Shadow defeats them effortlessly. Before leaving, Shadow warns them not to pursue him. Sonic, predictably, ignores the warning and chases after Shadow, catching up to him for another quick battle. Shadow knocks Sonic out and handcuffs Tails and Knuckles before leaving. The trio regroups and eventually meets Commander Walters, who narrates the origin of Shadow. The story begins 50 years prior, when a scientist discovered a mysterious object containing a life form with immense power chaos energy. Shadow's abilities were unmatched, but they proved dangerous. A terrible accident destroyed the lab, claiming many lives, and the project's leader was arrested. Shadow was placed in cryosleep in a Japanese prison for years, though someone apparently helped him escape. Their conversation is interrupted by a drone attack, and an individual arrives to rescue them. Unfortunately, Commander Walters is gravely injured. Before dying, he gives the hedgehogs a key, stating it unlocks the most powerful weapon ever created. He entrusts it to them, believing only they can be trusted. As more agents arrive, The hedgehogs escape and chase the man who saved them earlier. The trio questions the man, who reveals he came in peace and denies having anything to do with Shadow's escape. To prove his intentions, he shows them a large drone and requests their cooperation. Inside, they find Dr. Ivo Robotnik acting strangely. Dr. Robotnik's associates inform him of the current crisis, and he reluctantly agrees to work with Sonic and his team due to their mutual enemy. Meanwhile, Shadow returns to his lab, where he finds a pair of skate shoes. As he looks at them, he has a flashback of the professor's granddaughter entering the lab. She befriended Shadow despite his confinement and shared a strong bond with him. Together, they played, danced, and created memories. One night, Shadow confided in her about feeling like a dangerous experiment rather than a living being. The professor interrupts, informing Shadow that he always believed he'd return home and that it was time to make people pay for their wrongdoing. Back in the present, Sonic and Dr. Robotnik arrive at a massive facility where Shadow was kept. They split up to search faster. Tails and Knuckles are captured by Shadow in the dark, while Sonic discovers an old photo of Shadow and the professor's granddaughter. Shadow arrives and attacks Sonic, and Dr. Robotnik encounters his grandfather, who reveals himself and takes Dr. Robotnik to meet Shadow. Shadow demands the key Commander Walters gave to Sonic, but Sonic denies having it. Searching Sonic's pockets, Shadow finds it and vows to use it to launch a devastating attack. Sonic pleads with Shadow to reconsider, but Shadow, consumed by anger over the past, opens a portal to unleash chaos. As the portal begins to consume everything, Tails urges Sonic to grab a ring, which they use to escape. Meanwhile, Dr. Robotnik and his grandfather bond, but their reunion is short-lived. Shadow pushes forward with his plan to unleash chaos, and Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles devise a plan with Tom and Maddie to stop him. They travel to London, where Shadow and the professor attempt to retrieve a second key. Sonic's team infiltrates the building and discovers Shadow's weapon. A series of battles ensues as the hedgehogs confront Shadow. Sonic and Shadow fight fiercely. Shadow gains the upper hand and questions Sonic's actions, accusing him of abandoning his friends. When Shadow mentions Tom, Sonic, overcome with emotion, hesitates. Remembering Tom's words about not letting pain change who he is, Sonic decides to console Shadow instead of fighting. He reminds Shadow that Maria's love will always remain, convincing Shadow to join forces with him. Together, Sonic and Shadow destroy the weapon, saving Earth. Dr. Robotnik sacrifices himself in the process, and Shadow redirects the ship's explosion away from the planet. In the aftermath, the hedgehogs return home, where Sonic and Knuckles reconcile. The film ends with the trio starting another race, this time with a renewed sense of camaraderie. Kindly subscribe for more recaps like this. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.